My name is Barbara, and I've been on enteral nutrition since September of 2020.
My name is Andy, and I've been on nutrition since February of 2018.
I'm Jaden. I have been on tube feeds overall for about 5.5 years.
My name is Julie, and I have been on the enteral nutrition since May of 2023.
I'm Michelle Montgomery, and I started nutrition back in 2016.
My name is Tiffany, and I have been on tube feeds for almost 20 years at this point.
Oh gosh, I think it was just patience. I mean, initially, you may have this for 3 months or 4 months.
So when I first started nutrition therapy, I was on nasal tube feeds and was struggling with nourishing myself all around. So just really had a hard time committing to doing tube feeds and not just like wanting to skip it and burnt out, and like was just trying to communicate with doctors and so many things. And so the first challenge really was just like, do I want to do this? Why am I doing this? Like, can I commit to doing this every day?
Learning how to be connected to the pump 24/7 and learning how to maneuver with that pump with my obstacles around the house, not getting caught on things, not forgetting that I'm attached and walking away from it.
Starting the tube feeding, everything is centered around food. You go to family member's house, you go to holidays, everything goes around food. So my biggest transition was to actually accept that I had to have a feeding tube and that I could no longer, or not as often, swallow food by mouth. I needed this as a backup.
Getting home, because at first I was eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner on tube feeds using gravity. So making sure you were always home to have a meal. Because at first I wasn't comfortable bringing the tube with me, the bag with me, the formula with me. So it was that making sure I was home for every meal.
So when I first started HEN, we started very low. I started it in the hospital. And then when I went home, it was a totally different situation. No longer have the pump, like not the beep hole and all that stuff. And also didn't. So basically, it left me at home most of the time. So I was just not doing well with it. And it was just not worth going out because I just kept getting sick.
I do work from home. I have not had to deal with going into the office at all, but even just working at home has been extremely difficult. Trying to manage doing the feedings through bolus, I eat 4 times a day. Trying to manage that, trying to manage doing the medicine, all your medicines along with the bolus feeds and everything that goes with that while working has been challenging, anxiety provoking, and I can't think of the right word to use for the rest of it, but it's been very, very, very difficult.
So figuring out how to run feeds while going to work has never really been an issue for me. I never had the fear of like, oh, well, what if somebody sees me? What if I like have this? I've had a couple of really good interactions of having it at the pool. I had a mom specifically request that I teach her kid, and I had no idea why, and I didn't understand. And it like came out during our first lesson. I was just like in my swim trunks. I didn't have a shirt on. And the kid immediately was just like, oh, you have an extra belly button too? And it was just like so sweet that this like mom just like came, saw me during lap swim and was like, I need you to teach my child. And so I just like, I think that was one of the first things that I was like, oh, being vulnerable with this has created so many connections.
No, I have not worked. I had retired like 5 years before the cancer was found. And so no, I'm retired, and with all this, it's a full-time job.
So I can't work because I'm 100% with VA because of I have gastroparesis. But I did go to school when I started feeding tube, and that was a nightmare. Everybody would complain that my pump was beeping, that it would make like not like a beep, but it would make, I'm sure everybody knows that raw kind of sound that it makes. And they're like, hey, can you shut that off? And I'm like, I really can't. I'm so sorry. Like, I can like possibly run it out the door, but I can't turn it off. And it was always such a disturbance to everybody.
I was pretty lucky because when I was put on tube feeds, it was during COVID. So I actually was working at home for most of it, actually for all of it. So I never had to go in the office. So I didn't have to manage it. I just had to manage when I was going to eat around my work schedule.
When I go, if I'm traveling, and I will go to the airport attached to my HEN and to my TPN. And what that does is it basically says, hey, I can't go through this gate. I need somebody to get me through. We've learned early on that you need to leave a lot of extra time. You want to get through the line, which is sometimes the biggest things. But second, you're probably going to get packed out, So that will take a while for them to actually get somebody to come over and do that for you.
With it, you always have to prepare. Like, for example, this last summer, we went to Europe. We hadn't been there for a while. Or whether I'm going out to New York, and that's where all of our kids are. You have to plan ahead. Like, if you're going to be gone for a longer period, I'll ship my food and supplies ahead of me. That's worked out well. Like this summer going to Germany, you have to go through customs and TSA and all that. But I've shipped it, or I've carried it with me. And my joke is that when I travel, I have a lot more luggage going than I do coming back.
So at first I traveled with it, and that took me going online and purchasing a bag that fit my pump, because it was always such a smaller bag than the bag that, I mean, you have to carry syringes, you have to carry medications, like a little tiny bag that's just going to hold your pump is just not enough, especially not with slip tip syringes. Like, it's just not going to fit. I talked to my doctor, said, hey, like, if I want to leave the house and, take it with me, well, we're hoping that it doesn't come to that. I get it, but it kind of like places you at home, because if you're supposed to run 4 to 8 cans a day, that's a lot of formula to be running and sitting in one place for that period of time. So recently I haven't been taking it with me. It's just been running it at home as needed.
Travel it's an adventure. The first time I traveled with it, I didn't really understand my rights. I didn't really understand things. And I've pretty much always carried on all of my stuff. The very first time that I did, TSA was like, you have to open every bottle and we have to swab it and we have to like do this stuff. And I was like, I can't, like, it's gonna spoil it all. And like, that was really hard to try and figure out what my rights were around it. But over the years, it's just been like, oh yeah, you can swab this, you can like swab the outside of the bottle. Figuring out that if I like package all of my cartons and like all of my supplies in individual Ziploc bags, like how they send it in our deliveries, which I hate. But if I do that, it's made going through TSA lots easier, and also just like packing everything back up after they've exploded my carry-on is just so much easier.
Well, starting in February 2021, they put me on a pump, and now I feed overnight. So mealtime, I'm not eating out. So I'm always feeding overnight. So I still cook for my husband, but my rule is cook once, eat 2 or 3 times. So I'm always still cooking for him. We had people over for New Year's Eve. I still made 4 desserts for everybody. So I love to cook and watch people eat what I've cooked and tell me how good it is. So I make myself a part of the meal, not necessarily eating the meal. What I have found in cooking for my husband, the smells of meat, whether it's chicken, fish, red meat, if I ever got off the tube again, I don't know if I would eat those anymore. They just don't smell good to me.
Oh my goodness, how I could go on about this one. So I do miss food and I miss it a lot. It ebbs and flows, but I cannot stand, and I hope nobody I know sees this because I have a lot of issues with people not wanting to eat in front of me. But I personally, I don't like going to grocery stores. I don't like walking the aisles saying, oh man, I used to love that. I so wish I could have this. I don't like going to restaurants. I will not go to restaurants. I have not been in one and I will not go to one because the smell. I can just walk outside and if there's a restaurant close by, it's just like, oh man, I remember the days.
Well, I always remember what it was like to really chew and swallow and enjoy. I've never had problems with my taste buds, so I could put food in my mouth. Like in the morning, I sip on coffee, but I can't swallow thin liquids, water real well. But now, mashed potatoes, maybe avocados, little French toast, I can chew, I puree it really well, and then I swallow.
I wish I didn't need it so often. I really do. I mean, everybody around us eats food. You go to a family function or you go to any kind of function and it's based off of the food. And it really, I don't know, it's more like depressing. Like, I want to eat that, but should I take the consequences to eat that? Or should I just stick to what's going to be best for my body?
I have started to just do food events with friends. I generally don't hang out with my family for holidays. I generally go visit them. I live a state or so away from my family, my bio family, and always just go back when it's not peak holiday time. It makes it easier for travel, but it also is just like I don't have to deal with family members. I don't have to deal with like a lot of that, and have really just surrounded myself with people who are more okay with it. Of like, here are the foods that you can eat. Here are the things that you can do, and like connecting more with what is accessible and finding people around me who support that.
So basically now, like at holidays and stuff though, like I've become the person that goes around and takes pictures. And that basically gives me a purpose, but I'm not sitting and just watching people eat and then just wondering like, oh my God, I'm gonna throw up. Like, is this gonna happen? So I basically started just, I'll walk around to like multiple events and I'll always be taking pictures. And that's a way for me to distract myself from everybody else eating.
So I take medication that stimulates my appetite, and I try to take that medication right before we go to a food centered event, to where if I want to eat something, I can still eat it. I'm still going to get the consequences of it sitting in my stomach, but it's not going to make me sick right away. Like, it's going to give me a little time, I guess, little time to have it.
You know, like yesterday, we were invited to someone's house for New Year's Day. I just talk to people. I might get a cup of hot coffee. That's the one. I could tolerate hot drinks, so I'll do that. If it's something like the 4th of July, I might zip on a bottle of water to feel like I'm doing something. But again, as I said before, I'll help clean up, I'll help serve, so that I'm part of it, but I'm not necessarily eating.
I learned that advocating is absolutely necessary because people don't understand what you're going through. Unless you're going through what I'm going through, you don't know. You don't understand. you shouldn't be talking to me like, you shouldn't be talking down to me. You shouldn't be yelling at me. It should be a conversation. But I'm going to stand up for myself.
I think it's important to advocate for yourself and to ask questions.
Something that is super helpful that I'm really not that great about is having some level of objective data, keeping track of bowel movements. What is my total daily intake? How much water am I getting? How much tube feeds am I getting? How often do I run? How often do I change my gauze pads? And that is something that I have to balance of like, those are really important and helpful things to take to my providers. But sometimes I don't have the capacity to do that. I don't have the capacity to keep track of all of these things and be so immersed in it. And so really just understanding like, am I seeing a provider that wants objective data?
You cannot give up. You have got to advocate. And when you think you're done advocating, you got to advocate some more. And then just when you think you're pushing hard enough, you have to push harder because it is hard and you have to do it. No one's going to do it for you. And you have to. I could not even come up with a strong enough word on how imperative it is to advocate for yourself. And even to have someone with you when you go to help advocate if you're in a place where you can't advocate.
Well, there's no doubt the most important person is my wife, Frederica.
My husband, 100% my husband.
It depends what the issue is. I either turn to my husband, like if my tube area is really red, or if it's leaking, because he's had his ostomy for so long, he knows what to use, what creams to use, how to tape up the 4x4s. So I'll turn to him. But if I'm having issues with my tube feeding and other things like that, I turn to other Oley ambassadors. And they've been very supportive of me.
I have a different person for emotional support. I have a different person for physical support. I have chronic illness friends online that I turn to, people that I FaceTime when I set up my feeds to have that element of connection. And then also people that have no idea what I'm going through, to have that break of, I am so exhausted from being chronically ill that I just want to go hang out with people who have no idea what I'm talking about, have no idea what's going on, that we can have conversations that are not related to my illness, and also having people that I can go to for that.
Pretty much for me, carrying it would then be the fanny bag if I've got food in there. Well, then I'm going to have some extension tubes that may be showing, but usually I'll have a jacket or I'll kind of cover it up.
My backpack is basically my TPN backpack can take TPN, or it can also take an enteral pump if I need to. So I would use a backpack. Sometimes people do question the backpack, but I haven't had that many issues with it. But I have had some people staring at me and because they see the backpack, but then they see something coming out of the backpack and they're like, what is this person doing?
I'm very open about it. I tell people I'm tube fed. People will see me at a table because we do a lot of card games. We go out for dinner with people. We're very involved. We're Jewish and we're very involved with our synagogue. So after the service, you go back and you go to the social hall and you have dessert. And people are like, how come you're not having anything? And I'm very open letting people know I'm tube fed. So I'm very open about it and just talk about it.
So we're oddly enough, I never had anybody ask me about it, probably because I don't ever go anywhere. But when I have gone out and I have taken it with me to stores or whatnot, no one's asked me about it, but it was hard carrying it with me.
I am very open about my stuff. The biggest thing has been figuring out how to communicate that to the audience that's asking it. Figuring out for little kids, it's like, oh yeah, my tummy's broken and I like can't eat food very well, so like this helps me eat food. One time when I was teaching swim lessons, this kid was like asking a bunch of questions and he's like, well, where does it go? And I was like, well, it goes into my stomach. And he just like pondered for a second. He goes, if I poked you really hard, would my finger end up in your stomach? And I was like, yeah, technically it would. And he was like, I don't want to do that. And then just like went back to it. And that was just like, it was so wholesome. And also just like, kids just want to know. They just like, they want the quick little answer. And then they're just curious and they're like, cool, bro.
I'd rather people ask. I'd rather people ask. There's been many times that I have a dangle, so mine hangs out the bottom of my shirt. I've tried like the button and it's just too tight with all the bloating. So I always get the dangle that you can adjust the bumper. And I have people look over and they'll look at the bottom of my shirt and then look at me and like, I would rather you have to walk up to me and be like, hey, what is that? And I will have no problem. I'll explain it to you. But just staring me down, just don't stare me down. I will gladly tell you what it is and I'll tell you why I have it. I'll even show you how it works if you want to see. That's fine. But just don't stare me down.
At this point now, like, it's really hard to hide stuff. It's very hard. For a while, I literally, like, I would not tell anybody anything. It was just, like, closed off. And that was in between 2010 and 2013. I basically became so closed off. And I didn't really tell anybody about my diagnoses because, well, number one, I didn't really have one yet. And but it did make me become isolated because I didn't want to go out anymore because I knew that, you know, people are going to ask, people are going to see, and it's hard for me to share. Now it's not. Now I get my story out as much as possible. I do like to speak because I like to talk about my story because I'm hoping that it will help somebody else as well.
Definitely the food aspect of it, definitely the going out and doing things part of it, because like we said, everything seems to be food centered in society. It's all about going out to eat and meeting at a restaurant and all that stuff. But I guess it's going places. And one big one is a relationship. That's a big one. My attitude has always been, who wants all this stuff? Who is going to get involved with me with all of this that just keeps on growing like some malignant disease, you know? And, you know, when you try to meet people and you are upfront and just like completely honest about the whole 9 yards, including how much of your day it takes up, and they block you, that like confirms everything. Like, well, there you go. See, I told you so.
No, because basically, especially because I feed at night, there's nothing I can't do. I really feel that there's nothing I can't do. And because, and I hate for him to see this video, because my husband is on dialysis, I see there's much more limitations with that than there is for me. I mean, tomorrow I could jump on a plane and go anywhere I want. Where with him, we have to set up dialysis in the city we're going to, where if you're tube fed, you could do whatever you want. All you have to do is take your feeds with you, take your pole with you, or take however you feed yourself with you. And your life doesn't have to change.
The things that I've missed out on have been when my things have malfunctioned. It has been difficulty going swimming because the balloon on my tube has popped and now I have to wear an abdominal binder to hold the thing in so that it doesn't fall out. I've missed out on things because my pump has died. And now I was planning a whole day of doing stuff, but my feeds didn't run last night. And so now I have to figure out how to keep them running all day so I don't miss out.
Absolutely. So a common thing that I used to go and do would be going tubing in the summertime with my friends. And I can't get in that water now. Like, unless I tape completely the stoma site is covered. And even then, I'm still nervous because I know what lives in that water. So I just can't, I just don't do it. Like, I can't go to like a public pool. I enjoy swimming, or like going to the river. I can't just jump in the water. Like, I have to get all this tape and all these coverings on, and then hope that it's going to keep all those like gross germs out of that tube area. And it's just not a risk that I'm willing to take anymore. So it's just, I just don't do it anymore. Like, there's a lot of things like that. Or like, I don't know, I feel like there's so many activities where you're scared that your tube is going to get snagged, or like, because I can't use tape, the tape I'm allergic to. And without a belly band, I can't just go take off and go do the activities that I used to do. I need to get a belly band, or I need to get the stoma covered. There's just so much to it.
I think that, I used to be very like much of a hothead, and I would just like go off, and like if someone says something to me and I didn't like it, well, you know what, you're gonna get my mouth. But I've learned to kind of tone that down somewhat, and I've learned to try. It's hard. I don't know. You can do it either. Try to think before I speak, and try to plan in my head like what I'm gonna say. But then when I say it, it doesn't come out the same way that I thought. So it sometimes sounds, it might look like I'm angry, and also people think that I'm always angry. But
I think a lot of me is like, this is hard enough as it is. Let's try to keep that stuff, tucked away, and just not deal with it, and just keep on pushing forward. Getting through all this and getting to where we need to be, a diagnosis and accurate treatment and everything else is more important. So I tend to not deal with it like I should be, although I am in therapy. For me, it's with my therapist, if I can say it, even if she doesn't have to say anything at all, if I'm just like in knots or mad, if I can just spit it out and throw it at her, and she doesn't even have to say anything, just the fact that I have, gotten it out can a lot of times be good enough.
So I depend on my husband, I depend on my sister, but when it gets past something I think they can handle, I went and sought professional help. So I talk to people. I'm very open, I'm very honest, and you have to say to yourself, I need something more than I know my family could help. And that's what I did, and I got through it.
I do a lot of gaming. I do a lot of gaming and crafts. Those are my go-to when I'm feeling down or depressed. Especially my crafting. Kind of like lifts you up, and then it gets you thinking about other things that you can put into it rather than focusing on just what made you grieve in the first place.
All right. Tips, tricks, life hacks are they are my best friend. They are my favorite thing to do. I am a huge sustainability person, and I hate how much waste comes out of a lot of things. And that was originally my inspiration for figuring out how to run my feeds through an Nalgene bottle and adapting things. And it's just grown from there to making my own pump hangers and crocheting and sewing. The biggest thing for me is I hate IV pulls. That is something I despise, and it's something that has always been a distinguisher for me of like, IV pulls are hospital sick, and I don't want that in my house. I want to integrate my feeds, integrate my device and everything into my life. How can I make it fit the aesthetic of my home? How can I store my supplies in a way that doesn't make my closet feel like a supply room? And all of those things have contributed to feeling like I have individuality, personality. I can adapt my feeds to my care. I can make it look like me and take away some of this medical aspect of it. It's incorporated into my home. And those ways also make it lots easier to set up. It's set up in a way that works for me, that my syringes and my meds, they're all in the kitchen. They have their own little drawers. The top drawer of my dresser in my room has flushes, it has gauze, it has little things that I would need that are not out on display all the time. It's places that I need them, and it's made it a lot easier to not comply, but to be compliant with my feeds.
You can wind your line up and snap it however you need it, snap back up to keep your line wound up inside of it. I'm not even up with the camera. And then this right here is your clip, and it opens up. You clip it to your clothes or wherever you want to hold your line to, and it will hold your line and keep it all wound up and out of the way. It's not dragging on the ground. You're not catching it on doorknobs, not, door pulls or anything else.
I've always have had to manage my care because since 1997, when I got in a really bad car accident, a head-on accident, I've had medical issues. So I always had to. So I learned how to crush my pills, how to make my medicine. But when I switched to the pump in the hospital, they just taught my husband. And one night he was sleeping and I couldn't figure out my pump myself. So I sat there and cried and said, I think I was 61 at the time. And I'm like, I'm a 61-year-old woman and don't know how to feed myself. So I woke him up and made him show me how to use the pump. So I knew everything but the pump. So now I know how to use the pump too, because I'm thinking that's ridiculous. So I knew everything but the pump. And now it's so important that as a person on, whether you're on TPN, you're on tube feeds, even if someone wants to help you and they want to crush your pills or they want to gather your tube feeds and they want to start your pump, that's great that your caregiver or your partner wants to help you do that. Make sure you know how to do it yourself, because you never know when someone's going to be sleeping and you need to eat.
Learn to manage and necessity of managing didn't feel like an option. Having to rely on somebody else for those things was not something that I was willing to do. I needed to be able to set up my feeds to adequately nourish and hydrate myself. And I needed to be able to do all of those things on my own because I was not willing to have to rely on a nurse to come set things up, to have to wait for something to happen. I've got things to do. I've got plans. I can't be sitting around waiting for this stuff. And figuring out how to be independent in it was the only thing that made it feel okay. I wish that there was a way that I could not be independent sometimes. And I hope that one day I can have a partner or a community space that is more shared in those areas. But for right now and for all of my time on nutrition therapy, it has always been an independent activity for me.
Make connections and don't think that you have to do it alone. Also, don't think that you're a failure.
I've always been good about that, like changing the tubes. I know how to do that, but Freddie's always here close by, but we've got it down. I remember initially we were going up to Mayo the next day and it popped out like we did not know how to change it at that time. So I went to emergency. Seemed like it took forever. But now we know how to do it and we can do it quickly. And then I always order a backup one and I've got one available.
Don't beat yourself up. Take it slow. Don't panic. Just take your time, do it right, and don't beat yourself up. It's so easy to beat yourself up. Just do it. That's all. You just do it. Ask for help when you need it, but just go easy on yourself. you'll get there. You get your routine down, and before you know it, you are just zipping right through it. And you look back and you're like, wow, I have come a long way.
If you know that it's something that you need, even though they started you on a peg tube, keep pushing them, because if you know that's what you need, then they'll get you on what you need. But it feels like such a process. Other than that, get everything you need for it. Even if you think that you don't need it, get it, because it might be something that will help you. There's been a lot of things that I've been given that I'm like, oh, I could probably not use that. Like, I can go without that. And then I use it and I'm like, man, that's a game changer. That made my life so much easier. So if you get it and they give you an opportunity to use it, because 9 times out of 10, it will be something that you could definitely get use from.
It's okay if the formula doesn't agree with you, because sometimes it might not be the right one. And if you have to change formula 2, 3, 4 times till you get the right one, you're not the first person that has ever happened to. You might feel like, oh my God, I'm failing. You're not. There's other people who have gone through different formulas. It's okay to ask questions. If you don't ask questions, that's a problem.
It's not the end. Beginning nutrition therapy was terrifying. I could only see the ways that it was going to destroy my life. And that has not been how it is. There's ways that it's made it hard. There's ways that I've had to figure out how to adapt. But I could not be the person I am, and I could not do the things that I'm doing today without my nutrition therapy. And I wish that when I was starting, I would have written out all of the things that I want to do, all of the things that I want to accomplish in life. And especially having been ill for so long, being malnourished, being dehydrated, there were so many things that I lost access to while getting diagnosed and while starting my therapy. And I wish that I would have laid those out. What are the things that I miss right now that having these symptoms, having malnourishment, having dehydration are taking me away from? Because I was not able to see that adding this new device, adding this whole new thing to my life could give those things back to me. And that's exactly what they did. And I'm so grateful to be where I am today, and I would not be here without being on nutrition treatment.